let us begin in earnest. Okay, last time we went through this discussion here in the Gemara about the Kitea. I want to review this because actually I was just in the middle of reviewing the recording from last week. I didn't finish listening to the recording, but I know we left a few things hanging. And I think there's some loose ends that we can tie up. So let's review the basic sugya that we've had so far. So this part of the Gemara began when we said this was the end of previous Amud, the tu kamebailuhu, mahu letzet b'sandal shel sha'am b'yom kippurim. So, right, this is when they asked questions of Rabbi Elazar in the Beit Midrash. The first one had nothing to do with Yom Kippur, if you remember. The first one was this question of if a zaken v'yoshev b'yeshiva needs to take permission to paskin on the mum of a bechor. But the next question is a question about Yom Kippur, and that was this question about are you allowed to go out with a sandal made of sha'am on Yom Kippur? One of the things I want to be medayek about here is says it's latseit, the sandal, something that we didn't note last time. What is it to go out with a sandal of sha'am on Yom Kippur? So what the word latseit, what does it imply in this context, to go out?
Maybe at home you can use
it. So, right, so in other words, latseit implies going out of your house. Michael Werner, what did you want to say?
No, I mean, as I say, it involves going from Rishud HaYachid to Rishud HaRabim.
Right, that's better. Right, yeah. No. So that you're saying is better. In other words, let's say is we connect that with the Isur of Hotza'ah on Shabbat and Yom Tov, and in this case Yom Kippur. So it implies that there might be a problem of carrying if you wore a sandal of sha'am. Mahu latseit. In the context of Yom Kippur, it could have both of these implications. Both, is it considered to be a min'al? Is it considered to be a shoe for the purpose of Yom Kippur, meaning that you wouldn't be allowed to wear it at all, even inside your house? But the letzeit part implies maybe even if it's not a shoe, maybe there's other reasons why you're not allowed to wear it, because it would be like hotza'ah, it would be like you're carrying something. Amad Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani al Raglav Yoma ani reiti Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi sheyatzah b'sandal shasham b'yom kippurim v'amina lei b'tanit tzibur mai. So he said, I saw Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi who went out with a sandal of sha'am on Yom Kippur, and I said to him, what about on a tanit tzibur? And he said to me, lo shna, it doesn't make any difference. And then we had a similar testimony from Rabbi Bar Barchana. He said, I saw Rabbi Elazar de Ninveh. He went out with a sandal of sha'am on Tanit Tzibur. And I said to him, what about Yom Kippur? And he said, it doesn't matter. Right? It makes no difference. Michael Werner, I want to ask you something.
Yes.
Do you have, you don't have a copy of what I'm reading. Are you just reading, you're following me on the screen?
I'm following on the screen. I don't have a printer.
The reason I ask, and I don't know if this is helpful for you, because I know it's very easy for you to drop off. If you had an actual copy in your hand to follow, maybe that might help. I don't know. I was thinking
conceivably, but I don't think that would make the difference.
Okay. All right. So try to stay with us here. Rav
Yes.
Yehuda nafik b'dehitne, Abaye nafik b'dehutze, Rav nafik b'dikule, Rav bar Rav Huna, Karich Sudra Krai nafik. Okay, so let's go over these again briefly. So each of these people is wearing some kind of footwear that was made from the way I put it last time is some kind of vegetation, some kind of vegetable source. So one of them, Rav Yehuda's b'dehitne, Rashi says it's a type of sham, and we discussed last week what sham might be. Abai said went out with hutzi. Rashi says that was a sandal made of date palms, and Rav Nafik b'dikule, which would be also some kind of a palm tree. Or Rashi had the gears of Bedivle, which would be some kind of grass. Rabba Baravhuna Karich Sudra Krai Nafik. So Rabba Baravhuna wrapped a scarf or some kind of a sudar around his foot and went out. Now, I didn't make any notice of this last time, but let's think about this for a minute. What's the difference between the first three types of footwear and what Rabba Baravhuna wore when he wrapped the sudar?
I mean, the first three are, in all likelihood, intended to be footwear. The primary purpose is footwear. What Rabba Huna is wearing was not intended to be footwear, but that's just how he's using it.
Okay, and yes, and when so he's using it as footwear, and what would be the purpose of this footwear?
It's a cloth of some kind. So, I mean, I would guess to wrap one's face, wrap one's head. I don't know.
No. What's the purpose of using it as wrapping it around your foot? In other words, it's not what you say is true. The first three, that they're making some kind of footwear out of either reeds or cork or or palms or whatever it is. They're making footwear, but this last one, he's just wrapping a cloth around his foot. So what's the purpose of doing what does he gain by doing that?
I mean, some protection for the feet, I would guess. I mean, just
okay. Yeah. So
he's not going barefoot.
He's not going barefoot. So like Michael says, he gets some kind of protection from his foot. But it is important to note, as we'll see, it's important to note that that he wasn't wearing something that was designed as footwear. Now we have this question, Meitiv Rami Bar Chama. So Rami Bar Chama asks a kasha. Hakitea yotze bekav shelo divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi Oser. So the kitea, the amputee, he goes out, as we discussed last week, with his kav, which is his prosthetic leg. According to Rabbi Meir says he can do that, and Rabbi Yossi says he's not allowed to do that. When are they talking about? When can the kitea go out with his kav, according to Rabbi Meir?
Or maybe Shabbat, actually. So, I mean, maybe the question. The question of whether the issue is one of carrying, whether it's a question of leather footwear.
Okay, let's make a little bit of order here. So Akitei Yotzei Bekav Shel Divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi Yoser, V'Tani Allah, V'Shavin Shasur Letzeit Bo B'Yom Kippurim. They agree that he's not allowed to go out with it on Yom Kippur. So then what?
Shabbat.
So the Mishnah is talking about Shabbat, and if you remember, last week we actually looked at the Mishnah. It's a Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat. That's in Perek Bamei Isha, which starts off talking about different things that a woman may wear or not wear when she goes out on Shabbat. So here it's talking about a kitea. So the kitea has a prosthetic leg. So Rabbi Meir says on Shabbat he's allowed to go out with his prosthetic leg. why would we think why would we think he's allowed to? Why would we think he's not allowed to?
So on Shabbat, I mean, it would depend on, we would think that he's allowed to because it is the equivalent of a shoe. Or
Okay.
yeah, it's base, or it's, it's like base the garment, which is, it's the equivalent of any other garment.
Okay, so the in the first instance, we might assume that the reason Rabbi Meir says that the kitea can go out with his prosthetic leg on Shabbat is because for him it's a shoe. It serves the same function as a shoe. And why would Rabbi Yossi say it's a sur?
It does not have the function of a shoe. It has some other function.
We'll put it a little bit differently. Just a second.
Now I do remember what the text says later on, so that might be cheating. But
but right now, what do we think? What do we? So right now, what do we think? So right now, we think that maybe this is a machloket about whether or not the kav is considered to be a shoe. So if it's a shoe, then it's like any kind of garment, and then you can wear it and you can go out with it. In other words, you can take it from reshut while you're wearing it on Shabbat. But if it's not a garment, then it's just a masui. It's just something that you're carrying. In which case, it's asur. We will come back. Go ahead.
There's something, yes. For what reason are people nowadays allowed to use the katnoa, for instance, or something?
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't. It's obviously not in a garment. A garment, yes.
Garment, yes.
Yes.
Well,
so there should be some other reason because the people are impedimented.
But okay, so that's getting into a number of other issues. But remember the katnoa that you see, Michael.
No, I know, I do know that at the time of the Mishnah there was not such a thing.
No.
But nevertheless,
The reason it's not as the quick answer to your question though is that the katnoa. Michael, do you know what a katnoa is? It's one,
it's just one of these electric carts.
Yeah, it's something of an electric. Either it's an electrified wheelchair, or it's actually the katnoa is actually a little electrified car. They're all of those people use them within an eruv. So the question of hotza'ah is not the issue.
You can't leave the eruv with.
You wouldn't if
with a wheelchair. You can leave the eruv, which is not electrified.
Okay, so that gets into another whole set of questions. Some of them are actually related to the hemshech of the Mishnah, this Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat, which we glanced at, but I as I recall, I didn't go into the whole rest of the Mishnah, but it talks about other ways that people who didn't have legs, how they might propel themselves. And in one instance, there was the Mishnah refers to an idea of an amputee who might be sitting in a chair. That chair would not be the way we think of a wheelchair. It would be close to the ground so that he could just push himself onto the chair and he would propel himself forward using his hands. He would push himself forward using his hands. So that's a separate issue. It's related to your question, but since I don't want to go down that road right now, so let's just let's stick with this. So now, let's go back to this kasha of Rami Bar Chama. So Rami Bar Chama mitiv Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama is asking a kasha from this Mishnah and its subsequent Breita. The subsequent Breita, that's where it says Tani Allah. We learned it was learned on it. Tani Allah means that we have the Mishnah, etc. And then there was a Breita that was learned along with this Mishnah. So this Breita says something more than the Mishnah itself said, the Mishnah was only talking about the machloket on Shabbat, but in the Tanya in the Braita, it says, "V'shavin shasur etzeit bo b'yom kippurim." Both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi agree that he's not allowed to go out with it on Yom Kippur. So, who is not allowed to go out with what on Yom Kippur?
So
Yeah.
The
Go ahead.
Kiteva is not allowed to go out with.
His,
Katna.
with his cub, with his
cub.
bimplek.
The Kiteva is not allowed to go out with his kav on Yom Kippur. Okay, what's the
Why is Yom Kippur different from Shabbat?
So this is a question. Before we answer your question, though, Rami Bar Chama brings this as a kasha. Who is he asking a kasha on, and what is the kasha? What did the Gemara say right before Rami Bar Chama asks his kasha?
Oh, basically says that.
Not basically. What did it say?
So it
Don't conceptualize. Just tell me what it said.
So basically, Rabba Bar Rav Huna, I'm sorry, I'm just
What did he do?
so I'm sorry, I'm looking,
Can you read it off the screen?
I with my glasses, yes. Wait a second. It says that you can
You want to get your glasses?
I don't know.
Wait, the machloket is about if you can leave your house with the cub.
No.
No.
Rami Bar Chama brings the kitei of a kav shelo as a kasha on what the Gemara just said before. So what did the Gemara just say before?
That you can use cork shoes on Yom Kippur.
Okay,
or shoes done with some vegetable matter.
Okay, so before Rami Bar Chama asks his kasha, what do we understand? That these various rabbanim went out with shoes or foot. I'm going to use the term footwear because shoe, we're going to leave that specifically as a question. What counts as a shoe for Yom Kippur or not? So we'll say Rav Yehuda, Abai, and Rava all had footwear that was made from some kind of vegetation. And Rabba Bar Rav Huna, Michael, what did Rabba Bar Rav Huna do?
What is footwear? It's like min'al in Ivrit or something. Nal, lomat min'al, something like this.
Let's say yes, but the reason I'm going to say footwear in English is, see, in the Hebrew, in classic, right, in this classical sense, min'al means what we would just say na'al in modern Hebrew. Right, so min'al in modern Hebrew maybe is a wider term. It just means like some kind of footwear, but min'al, like in classical Hebrew and Mishnaic Hebrew, means a shoe. It just means a shoe. Michael Werner, what did Rabba Bar Rav Huna do?
So he brings the case of a prosthetic leg as a.
No. What did Rabba Bar Rav Huna do? That's the reason you went to get your glasses, because you couldn't read it off the screen. Rabba bar Rav Huna, what did he do?
So he'd wrap cloth around his feet.
Very good. So the Gemara brings these examples of people who on Yom Kippur had other kinds of things on their feet. Either they had some kind of footwear that was made from reeds or palms or something like that, or we have the case of Rabba bar Rav Huna, who didn't even have footwear per se, but he wrapped a cloth around his foot. Now, Meisiv Rami bar Chama. Rami bar Chama asks a kasha. So what's the kasha? He says, we have the case of the Kiteya. Rabbi Meir says on Shabbos the Kiteya can go out with his kav. Rabbi Yossi says he's not allowed to go out with his kav, but they both agree that that the Kiteya is not allowed to go out with his kav on Yom Kippur. What is the kasha? What's his kasha? Kasha, by the way, kushya, in the way we would, in non-yeshivish, we say kushya. Kushya always implies that there is a contradiction. That's the nature of a kasha. Kasha means I'm going to bring you something, I'm going to bring you a source that contradicts what you just said. So what did the Gemara just say, and what's the kasha?
So
how is it possible that they disagree on Shabbat, but they do agree on Yom Kippur?
You're asking a question within the context of the source that he's brought. But Rami bar Chama is asking a kasha on what just came before him. So what did the Gemara just say before? That all these people went out with different kinds of footwear on Yom Kippur.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the kasha from the source that Rami bar Chama brings? What does he say that contradicts that?
I don't think that. I don't see the contradiction, because a kav is not min'al. It's not the same.
Okay.
Oh.
Let's go back. So let's. I'm going to do
Oh,
it.
maybe it is the same. I don't know.
I'm going to do it all again. When we brought the Mishnah, this was the question I asked. I said, "Kitei yotzei b'kav shelo divrei Rebbe Meir." So, Michael Werner, why is it that you said? Why did Rebbe Meir say that the Kitei is allowed to go out with his kav?
Because it's kind of footwear.
Because it is a kind of footwear. Because it is some kind of a shoe. For him, it's a shoe. It serves the function of a shoe. What's the function of a shoe? To put what would you say if you had to define a shoe in the context that we're talking about? What does a shoe do?
It protects the foot.
It protects the foot when
when one is walking.
When you're walking, okay, it puts something between your foot, or in the case of the kiteya, your leg and the ground. Okay. So Rebbe Meir says you're allowed to use that. He's allowed to go out with it on Yom Kippur, on Shabbat, and then by implication, Rebbe Yossi Oser. Why is Rebbe Yossi Oser?
Because he doesn't think that the kav is an extended footwear or something like this.
Okay, so the simple way of understanding the Mishnah, which is the way Rashi explains it, we'll see in a second, is that's the machloket between Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yossi. Rebbe Meir holds that the kav is a shoe, and Rebbe Yossi holds the kav is not a shoe. But they both agree that you're not allowed to go out with it on Yom Kippur. So now, what's the kasha? that Rami Bar Chama is asking?
He seems to be suggesting that one goes out with the kav even on Yom Kippur. Am I reading that correctly?
No, not
No.
at all. Akasha means, again, we said X. Now we bring another source that says Y, and Y contradicts X. So what did we say? What was our X? Our X was these Rabbanim who went out with different kinds of footwear that were made from vegetable sources, let's say. Now I have a source that says the Kiteya is not allowed to go out with his kav on Yom Kippur, and both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi agree he's not allowed to use it on Yom Kippur. What was the kav made out of?
Of wood.
It was made out of wood. So what's the contradiction?
It's made out of vegetable. It's made out of vegetable material, and so therefore we'd think that one is allowed to go out with it based on the examples that we just saw.
Finally, okay, so that's what we have. This is what we have.
I must say that Rabbi Yossi isn't very charitable. No, he should find a reason to allow the Kiteya to walk on his
Okay,
wooden leg. Yes.
I'm going to set that question aside. I have to set it aside because otherwise, I really need everyone to concentrate here because I'm going to attempt to show you how to understand this sugya in two different ways. So I want to get at least through the first way. So this is the kasha. We say all of these rabbanim actually went out on Yom Kippur wearing different kinds of footwear that were made from some kind of vegetable source, from some non-leather source. And now I have a braita that says both Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir say that the Kiteya is not allowed to go out with his kav on Yom Kippur. Even now,
albeit it is made out of vegetable material.
Albeit, right? Right. Even though it's made out of some non-leather material, it's made out of some vegetable material. Now, before we go on, I just want you to consider one other thing, which is going to become, we're going to emphasize a little bit more later. What's the difference between wood as a material and all of the materials that Rabbi Yehuda, Abaye, Rava, and Rabba bar Rav Huna used for their footwear?
All these other materials are relatively perishable.
Well, was also perishable. I didn't think perishable
But not perishable, but it's not perishable to the same degree. Okay, I mean another difference is that I mean wood is also, I mean, impermeable. Like one is.
Think about for a moment. Wait a second. Think about it in context. We're talking about footwear. What's the difference between wearing footwear that's made of wood and footwear that would be made of, let's say, cork?
Oh, the other ones are soft. They're padded.
Oh, wood is hard. The other ones are not, right? And especially Rabba bar Rav Huna, who just put a piece of cloth around his foot, right? He just did it to cover his foot. If you wore shoes, let's say clogs, that are made of wood. So when you're walking on a hard surface. You're walking on something that's hard. It will protect you from whatever is on the ground, but it's not going to be. You're not going to feel the ground. If you make your shoe out of cork or out of rushes or out of date palm, you're going to make it you're going to have a shoe where you're going to feel what you're walking in. Okay, so there's a difference in between those materials. We didn't make that distinction last week, but I just want to point it out now because it will become important. All right, now, so before we go on, now let's examine a little bit more about this source that Rami Bar Chama brings. So again, Hakitei Yotzei B'Kav Shelo Divrei Rabbi Meir. So what are we saying? We're going with the idea right now that Rabbi Meir holds that the kav is a kind of a shoe, and because it's a kind of shoe, that's why a kitea is allowed to go out with it. He's allowed to go mereshut to reshut on Shabbat with his kav. Rabbi Yossi is oser. Our assumption is he holds it's not a shoe. And since it's not a shoe, then as we discussed last week, you're not allowed to go mereshut to reshut with something that is not explicitly some kind of a garment or some kind of a culturally accepted ornament. If it's none of those things, it's a masui. It's just something you're carrying, in which case you're not allowed to go out with it, maybe reshut to reshut. Okay? Now, when we have this Taniela, right? We have this subsequent Braita. It says, Shavin she'asur letzeit bo b'yom kippurim. They both agree, both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi agree, you're not allowed to go out with it. In other words, the Kitea is not allowed to go out with his kav on Yom Kippur. So, who is that a chidush for? Who would we have thought would have allowed you to go out with it on Yom Kippur? That I need a Braita to say.
Rabbi Bar Chama.
Rami Bar Chama is not in the Braita. He just brings the Braita.
Okay. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, ken.
Okay, so, and this is the way we learned it last week. So the idea is that we would have thought that Rabbi Meir, because he's matir on Shabbat for the Kitea, that the chidush is that he's also matir on Yom Kippur. Right, Michael?
Yes.
What did I just say?
We said that the Ketea is allowed to, is permitted to go out with the prosthetic on Yom Kippur.
What did I just say?
I'm sorry, I lost it.
Okay, so what we said is Rabbi Meir is matir for the Kitea to go out with his kav on Shabbat. And so we would have thought that he would have also been matir on Yom Kippur. So the chidush of B'shavin she'asur latzeit bo b'Yom Kippurim, the chidush is that even Rabbi Meir, who's matir on Shabbat, is oser on Yom Kippur. Because
maybe you think it has something to do with his conception. What is an inui?
So wait one moment. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's just make sure we have it. So we have the idea from Rabbi Yehuda, Abaye, Rava, and Rava Bar Avuna that you're allowed to go out on Yom Kippur wearing some kind of footwear that's made from these kind of vegetable sources. Then I talk about the Kitea. Rabbi Meir says the Kitea can go out in his kav on Shabbat, even though it's, in other words, and it is, we understand it's made of wood. That's how we defined it. Presumably because it's a shoe. And Rabbi Yossi is oser, presumably because it's not a shoe. And they both agree that you're not allowed to go out with it on Yom Kippur. So just a second ago, we said, what's the chidush of the Shavin? The chidush is that even Rabbi Meir, who's matir on Shabbat, he's oser on Yom Kippur. Let's say that's true, but there's actually a problem with that. What are you not allowed to wear on Yom Kippur? On your foot, you're not allowed to wear a shoe. Right? So who holds that the kav is a shoe?
Um,
Meir.
Rabbi Meir.
Rebbe Meir holds that it's a shoe. So actually, between Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yossi, who would you think is oser to wear the kav on Yom Kippur?
Rabbi Yossi.
Why?
Because there's the new of not wearing shoes on Yom Kippur.
Okay, but what did you just say a moment ago? Who holds that it's a shoe?
So, well, Rabbi Meir holds this shoe, so therefore you'd expect him to assert on Yom Kippur.
Oh, okay. So stop there. Let's say, okay, in other words, that we're going to turn it around. I'm sorry, it's going to be confusing. I need you to pay attention. A moment ago, we said Rebbe Meir we would have thought Rebbe Meir is the matir for Yom Kippur, and the chidush of the Braita is that even Rebbe Meir says the Kitei is not allowed to go out with his kav on Yom Kippur, even though he's allowed to do it on Shabbat. He's not allowed to do it on Yom Kippur. Now, what I'm pointing out is I could turn that around. I could say punkt fakert. Rebbe Meir is the one we would have thought it would be matir on Yom Kippur, because that Rebbe Meir would be the one who's oser on Yom Kippur, because he holds that the kav is a shoe, and you're not allowed to wear a shoe on Yom Kippur. And I would have thought that Rebbe Yossi would have been matir because he holds it's not a shoe.
And
Now, I'm
if
sorry
it's
to
not a
confuse.
shoe, there is no reason to forbid to use it.
So then there would be no reason to forbid to use it. There might still be a reason to forbid using it on Yom Kippur, but I want to point out it's not at this moment, because I've raised both of these possibilities. I'm going to show you how to look at the sugya from both of these sides. Again, I'm going to keep things clear. We start off with the idea that you're allowed to go. We have Masei Rav of various Rabbanim who wear shoes that are not made of leather, that are made of some kind of vegetable source on Yom Kippur. And that seems to be perfectly fine, because otherwise they wouldn't have done it. Then I have Rami Bar Chama. He asks a kasha. His kasha comes from the case of the Kiteya B'Kav Shelo, that according to both Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yossi, the Kiteya is not allowed to go out with his kav on Yom Kippur. So, as you see, we have a number of questions about this, but the basic kasha is clear, that whoever holds that the Kiteya, that the kav of the Kiteya is some kind of footwear, right? It's some kind of minal. We could argue that that's the person who holds that it's asur on Yom Kippur, or I could argue differently. Okay, let's keep that for a second. Let's say that the chidush is Rebbe Yossi. So again, I want to make sure I'm being clear. When the Braita says Shavin Shasur Etzeitbo B'Yom Kippurim, I ask the question. Shavin means that until now I have a machloket, and now they agree. On this point, they agree. They have a machloket on Shabbat, but on Yom Kippur they agree. So the question is, for whom is that a chidush? Is that a chidush for Rebbe Meir, that he agrees with Rebbe Yossi on Yom Kippur, even though he disagrees with him on Shabbat? Michael?
Yes, I'm still here.
I know you're still here, but if you're not awake, you're not here.
I'm here, and I could give it over, I think, if need be.
Okay. The Shavin Shasur Etzeitbo B'Yom Kippurim, or is it Rebbe Yossi, that the chidush is that Rebbe Yossi, we would have thought have been matir on Yom Kippur, but he is oser. Okay, I think in order to keep this in order to keep this straight for the moment, I'm going to
But
learn.
it actually kind of makes sense that they both forbid it on Yom Kippur. They seem they forbid it for different reasons.
Well, they're going to forbid it for different reasons. That will probably be the case because they start off with different reasoning. But in order to keep this straight, I want to go, like I said, I want to go through this in two different ways. Let's go through it the first way, the way Rashi understands it. So the way Rashi is going to argue, the way Rashi is going to understand it is that that the chidush is going to be that Rabbi Yossi is oser on Yom Kippur, even though that seems that's not as obvious. Because when we see the original Mishnah, right? I'm just gonna reiterate something we said a moment ago. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir is matir, Rabbi Yossi is oser, and then Shavin shasur atzeit bo b'yom kippurim. Your first thought is going to be that even Rabbi Meir, who was matir on Shabbat, is going to be oser on Yom Kippur. However, we understand that's not so simple, because the reason Rabbi Meir was matir on Shabbat is dafka because he held that the kav is a shoe. So if the kav is a shoe, then he wouldn't be allowed to go out with it on Yom Kippur. Let's look at Rashi. Meitiv Rami Bar Chama, Hakitei Yotzei B'kav Shelo, B'Shabbat. And then Rashi defines a kav, which is a word in Old French, and it's translated as regel totevet, which is prosthetic leg. And Rabbi Yossi is oser. So Rabbi Yossi says the kiteya is not allowed to go out with his kav on Shabbat, right? So right now, until at this moment, we're only talking about Shabbat, and Rashi explains Rabbi Yossi oser. Why is Rabbi Yossi oser on Shabbat? Because
it's not a shoe.
Wait, let's read Rashi. Kasal kadatach, because it will go up in your mind. You will think. In other words, the assumption is, and whenever we use this term kasal kadatach or kasal kadaitach, it means it's an assumption that we're going to end up pushing away. But at this moment, our assumption is kasavar lav minalhu. Your assumption is, why is Rabbi Yossi oser on Shabbat for the kitei to wear his kav? Because the assumption is that he holds it is not a shoe. Kasavar lav min alhu. It's not a shoe. Ho'il ve'eino shav. And why isn't it a shoe? Why shouldn't it be a shoe? So Rashi explains, Ho'il ve'eino shaveh b'chol. It's not equal among all people. And I was going to bring you sources for this. There's a Mishnah in Beit, so this is based on that for certain aspects of Yisurim on Shabbat and Yom Tov, we have to have things that are shaveh lechol. In other words, for the vast majority of the population, a kav is not a shoe. So for individuals, maybe it functions for them like a shoe, but for the purposes of Shabbat, it's not going to be considered a shoe. Vafilu hachi, and nonetheless, Shavin Shasur Tzeit Bo B'Yom Kippurim. Nonetheless, they agree. It's Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir both agree he's not allowed to go out with it on Yom Kippur. Alma. So I learned from that. Afal Gav de Rabbi Yossi Lav Min Alhu Afilu Hachi Asir. I learned from that even though, according to Rabbi Yossi, the kav is not a shoe, nonetheless, it's asur when
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last sentence, please?
Again, Rabbi Yossi Oser, Kasal Kadatach. You make we're going with the assumption that Rabbi Yossi holds that the kav is not a shoe. And the reason it's not a shoe is because it's not shaveh b'chol. It's not a shoe for everybody, so then it's a shoe for nobody. Nonetheless, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir both agree you're not allowed to go out with it on Yom Kippur. So Rashi's going with the idea that for whom is it a chidush that you're not allowed to, that the kitei is not allowed to use its kav on Yom Kippur? The chidush is Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi holds that the kav is not a shoe. So we would have thought that the kitei could wear his kav on Yom Kippur. Michael, I keep losing you.
No, I'm doing the best I can. I'm sorry.
I know. Alma afalgav de Rabbi Yossi lav minalhu afilu hachi asud. We learn from this that even though, according to Rabbi Yossi, despite the fact that the kav is not a shoe, nonetheless it is forbidden. When is it forbidden?
On Yom Kippur.
On Yom Kippur. And then what's the kasha? V'hu hadin l'shel sha'am. If the kav is forbidden on Yom Kippur, then a sandal of sha'am should also be forbidden on Yom Kippur. That's the kasha according to Rashi. Michael, do you think you can repeat the kasha? It's okay if you can. I am trying to keep you awake, but if you can't do it, it's okay.
So we would think that since Rabbi Yossi says that it is forbidden on Shabbat because it's a shoe, because it's not a shoe, we would think that it would be permitted on Yom Kippur for precisely that same reason, because it's not a shoe, since it's specifically wearing of shoes that's not permitted on Yom Kippur.
Okay. And nonetheless,
he forbids it on Yom Kippur.
And therefore the kasha that Rami Bar Chama is asking is what?
Is so it seemed that even something that is not a shoe can be forbidden on Yom Kippur.
Okay.
Which refers at minimum to at least the last article in the previous section.
Okay, actually, and Rashi says it refers all the way, all to the idea of sham, which is how we started. In other words, basically, Rashi says this is a kasha on all the examples that were brought earlier. By mentioning sham specifically, which is the beginning of the sugya, he's saying that this is, basically any of these other options should be asur. Okay, good. We still have some questions hanging, but let's take it at this moment that this is the problem. That the problem is, once I understand that Rabbi Yossi who holds that the kav is not a shoe, and that I would have thought you're allowed to, you would then, the Kiteya would then be allowed to use it on Yom Kippur. Nonetheless, he is Oser. It indicates that these other materials that are used for making footwear should also be Asur, right? The Kav is only made out of wood. And nonetheless, he doesn't allow it on Yom Kippur because it's not even though it's not a shoe, nonetheless, he doesn't allow it. So anything that's not a shoe, but is used as some kind of footwear should also be Asur. The implication being what? That maybe the only heter on Yom Kippur is to go barefoot for anybody. Maybe that's what you have to do. That Nilata Sandal is so all-encompassing, it means you're not allowed to put anything on your feet. So Abaye wants to answer this kasha. Mar Abaye, Hatam, Okay, wait, I'm sorry. So 1 second. Before we go on. So this is all outside that, right? The Chidush is that Rebbe Yossi is Oser on Yom Kippur. And what about Rebbe Meir? Why is Rebbe Meir Oser for the Kitea to use his Kav on Yom Kippur? Because he's Matir on Shabbat. Why would he be Oser on Yom Kippur?
He's matir because it's a shoe, and he's oser on Yom Kippur because it's a shoe.
Because it's a shoe. Exactly. In other words, so that's the way it goes. Rabbi Meir is matir the kav for the kitei on Shabbos because it's his shoe, and people are allowed to wear shoes on Shabbos, so he's allowed to wear the kav. Rabbi Yossi is oser the kav on Shabbat because he holds it's not a shoe. So if it's not a shoe, he should be allowed to wear it on Yom Kippur. But he holds no. It's also on Yom Kippur. He's modeh that it's asur for the reasons that we gave. It's asur because apparently you're not allowed to wear any kind of footwear, even something that's made from wood. So Abaye says, I'll answer this kasha. Hatam di'itbe ktitin. So there, it's talking about where they're ktitin. What are ktitin? If you don't remember, it's okay, I'll tell you.
I don't remember.
Okay. Ktitin, Rashi explained. Chatichot begadim ktanot shehem nochot lo lismoch shoko aleihem. Paul, did I lose you now?
I think he's a goner.
I think we lost Paul. Okay. So Michael, all the more so that I can't lose you because otherwise I'll stop this year. Seriously.
Yes, of course.
No, I mean I could go on so that whoever's watching the video will have something to to finish off, but I don't like giving sheer to myself. So I'm not gonna go on. So what are ktitin? Chatichot begadim ketanot. They're small pieces of cloth, of clothing, right? Shehem nochot lo lismoch shoko alehem. They're comfortable for him to lean his thigh on, right? So the partial leg of there's Paul. The partial leg of the kitea rests in this kav, right? So we described the kav last week. The kav is made in the form of a leg with a foot, right? It's going to be made according to the length of leg that the person lost, right? If the person doesn't have a leg, so you'll measure from whatever point and you make it as long as whatever would have been normally. So Abaye is now saying that over there, it's talking about a case where there were ktitim, that the kav had ktitim. That is, at the top of the kav, there was a little impression, and he put some padding in the impression. And that makes it more comfortable for wearing. Hatam di'itbe ktitim, umishum ta'anug. And it's asur because it's a ta'anug. It's something that's delightful for the person who's wearing it. So remember again, what was our kasha? Our kasha was according to Rebbe Yossi, even according to Rebbe Yossi, who holds that the kav is not a min'al, he says you're not allowed to wear it on Yom Kippur, even though it's not a min'al. So we had a problem with that, because if that's true, then all these other people who are wearing their various shoes that are made from bamboo or from cork or from whatever, what's their heter to wear? Even Rabbi Yossi who holds, and if you say you're allowed to wear it because they're not shoes, but even Rabbi Yossi, who holds that the kav is not a shoe, says you're not allowed to wear it on Yom Kippur, even though it's not made out of leather, even though it's made out of some kind of vegetable source. Nonetheless, you're not allowed to wear it. So Abaye says, no. So over there, why is Rabbi, and again, I explained, Hatam means in the other source, not our present source. Our present source are all these Rabbanim who wear their various shoes. And over there, by Rabbi Yossi, what's he talking about? When is he oser to wear a kav on Yom Kippur? It's when it had ktitin. So if it has ktitin, then what's the problem? Mishum ta'anug. If it has ktitin, then it's mishum ta'anug. What does that mean, Michael? What's the objection?
So I mean, so if it has ktitin, then it's pleasurable to wear, and therefore it's not one of the afflictions of Yom Kippur.
And I understand what you're trying to say, right? In other words, therefore, he's not afflicting himself by wearing it. So therefore, he's not allowed to. That's why he's not allowed to wear it. So it's according to this understanding, the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi. Why is Rabbi Yossi oser for the kiteya? Why does Rabbi Yossi forbid the kiteya from wearing the kav on Yom Kippur?
Because the padding makes it a pleasure to wear.
Right, and if there wasn't any padding, then what would Rabbi Yossi say?
Wonderful. Go ahead. He would permit it.
He would permit it. So what was our kasha, and how did Abaye answer the kasha?
So the kasha was, if Rabbi Yossi forbids the ketiyah from wearing a kav even on Yom Kippur, it would seem to suggest, because even though he doesn't hold that it's not a shoe, then it would seem to suggest that all these other examples that we had of Rabbanim, Masei Rab, who wore things on their feet that would also not be considered a kav, should also be forbidden.
Not be considered should also be forbidden. Correct.
Right.
So now, how does Abaye answer that question?
Abaye answered the question by saying the issue is not that it's a different issue. Basically, he forbids it not because all things that are not shoes are forbidden, but rather because this is a special case because of the padding, which makes it pleasurable.
Very good. Well done. Well done. So that's the way Rashi indicates that we're learning, and I'm going to continue now in the next part of the Gemara where Rava challenges this. I'm going to continue on with that same pattern of thought. So Rava now challenges Abaye's answer. Amarle Rava. V'i lav manahu ktitin meshave le mana, and if it is not a kli, and I'm just going to skip. The implication is, if it is not, what he means here by kli, he means if it is not a shoe, do ktitin make it into a shoe? That's the way it's phrased. Do you understand what he's asking with that?
Yes.
What do you think that means?
So basically, if it's a shoe, then it is distinct from all these other examples, Masei Rab, that were not shoes.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Just a second. He starts off with this point, E lav manahu. If it is not a shoe, if what is not a shoe?
The kav.
If the kav is not a shoe, do ktitin make it into a shoe?
So does the padding make it into a shoe?
So does the padding make it into a shoe? So he's asking that in a kind of a rhetorical fashion. If I were to put that into a positive statement, what is he saying?
Padding makes a shoe.
Lehefech. What he's saying is that padding won't make it into a shoe.
Right, the padding will make, okay.
Right, that's his point. Is if to begin with the kav is not a shoe, does padding make it into a shoe? The implication being, no, it doesn't. In other words, according to you, Abaye, you want to answer this question by saying as follows. We start off with the idea that Rabbi Yossi holds that the kav is not a shoe. So why should he forbid it on Yom Kippur? So you, Abaye, want to say, oh, it becomes like a shoe because he's put padding on it, and that gives him ta'anug, and because of that, it's going to be asur. But the first implication is going to be that by giving it the padding, you've somehow took it from not being a shoe and made it into a shoe, because it's only a shoe that's asur on Yom Kippur. So he's saying, if I put it into a positive statement, padding isn't going to make it into a shoe. So I don't buy that. The ode, and even I'll say more. Kol tanug delav min alhu b'yom kippurim mi asur. Any kind of pleasure that one would derive from something that's not a shoe, or any kind of tanug, let's say, that's not even related to a shoe. The Yom Kippurim mi asur is that forbidden on Yom Kippur? Again, if I put it into a positive statement, he's saying pleasure is not forbidden on Yom Kippur. He's saying generally pleasure is not forbidden on Yom Kippur, except in the implication being except within the context of the Chamesh Inuyim. If something is not listed as an inui on Yom Kippur, then I don't care if you derive pleasure from it. Nobody said, and we talked about this, the Gemara talked about this earlier, like if it's a hot day, not only do you not have to go out and sit in the sun to suffer, but if you're sitting out if you're sitting outside and it gets very hot, you don't have to stay there. You can leave. You can derive pleasure by sitting in air conditioning if you want. Nobody says that that's forbidden. So you, Abaye, are saying that one of the reasons Rabbi Yossi is going to be oser this kav.
Yeah, I'm still here.
One of the reasons that Michael, you fool yourself if you think that you're listening when you close your eyes and do that. I'm just telling you, you fool yourself. You don't. You're not following. Maybe that's how you skated through school. I don't know, but I can tell you, you're not following. And I'm not saying that because it's a personal insult to me. It's not. I don't find this insulting, but you're not learning when you do that. It's just from a friend. You're not learning when you do that. You, Abaye, wanted to say that the underlying reason about why Rabbi Yossi says that you're not allowed, the Kitei can't wear his kav on Yom Kippur is because he's going to derive pleasure from it. Who cares if he derives pleasure from it? There's no isur in deriving pleasure from putting his stump on a pad on Yom Kippur. Vaha Rabba Rav Huna, and how do I know that's true? Ha Rabba Bar Rav Huna have a karich sudra akrae v'nafik. Rabba Bar Rav Huna, as we quoted earlier, he wrapped a cloth around his foot and went out. And nobody thinks that that's a shoe.
Mhm.
But why is he doing it? He's doing it so he'll be more comfortable. So for him, it's a ta'anug, and it's like ktitin on the stump of the kitea, and nonetheless, it's mutar. So he's saying. So Rav is saying to Abaye, I don't agree. Your teirutz cannot be the teirutz. It can't be the answer to this kasha. The ode, and there's another problem with what you're saying, Abaye. What's the third problem? Mi diktani seifa, im yesho beit kibuk titin tamei, michal dereisha lav b'di'id lek titin askinan. That implies that the Reisha is not talking about when they're ktitim. In order to understand the third thing, we have to look back again at the Mishnah, and we looked at it last week, but I know that you didn't memorize it, and that's fine. And we have to take a quick look at it again so you understand what it means. Okay. Ooh. This is the Mishnah as it appears in Mishnayot, right? Mishnah Shabbat Perek Shishi. Hakiteh yotze b'kav shelo divrei Rebbe Meir, Rebbe Yossi Oser. And what does it say right after it? V'im yesho beit kibuk tutim, in our gears it's katitim, tameh. If it has a place, a receptacle to hold ktitim, it's tameh. Now, I explained that last week. If you don't remember it, it's okay. But if you do remember it, can you tell me what it means?
Basically, if it has a concavity, it is susceptible to tuma. Since
Okay.
this is technically a cleat, or base kibble, which makes it a cleat. It's technically a cleat.
It'll make it a kli. And why wouldn't it have been? Why is it not a kli when it's flat?
Because it's not base kibble. It doesn't have that.
And why is that important? Because I don't want to. I just want to clarify. Because it's made out of wood, pshutei kli'etz are not mikabel tuma. What does it mean, pshutei kli'etz? It means a kli'etz that doesn't have a beit kibul. It's pashut, it's flat, right? If it doesn't have any kind of receptacle in it, if it's made out of, let's say, if it's made out of metal, shutei klei barzel are mikabel tuma. Like a spit, even though it doesn't have a beit kibul, if it's made out of metal, it's mekabel tuma. But that same form that's made out of wood is not mekabel tuma. But if the wooden thing has a receptacle, then just like you said, because it has a beit kibul, then it is mekabel tuma. And so here, what's the chidush? In yesho beit kibul ktitim tameh. So that's not that apparently it's not immediately important for Hilchot Shabbat, but it's important, let's say, in a wider context. I want to know what the din of this kav is. Is it mikabel tuma or not mikabel tuma? So the Mishnah is saying if it has a beit kibul ktitim, it is mikabel tuma. Just like you said, you did very well. So now I'll ask you a simple question. When the Mishnah says, "In yeshul beit kibul ktitim tameh," what does that tell me about the kav that Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yossi were discussing?
It is, I guess, presumably susceptible to tuma.
I'm going to rephrase the question. You'll ask and you'll answer it again. If the Mishnah here only at this point introduces the idea that this kav might have a beit kibul, then what's my assumption about the kav that Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yossi were discussing? Did it have a Beit Kibul or not?
I would say
You would say no, because until now, in other words, it says V'im yeshla, if it has. So what's the implication? Until now, it didn't have. Until now, I'm discussing something that doesn't have a Beit Kibul Ktitin. Rabbi Yossi Oser. At that moment, up until this moment, I'm assuming that the kav that we're talking about is pshutei kli eitz, and therefore tuma is not. It's not going to be in kabel tuma. It's not relevant. But if it does have a beit kibul ktitim, then it's tameh. Then it is mekabel tuma. You see what I'm saying?
yes.
So say it back.
Okay. So the issue for the bone of contention. I mean, if in fact the kav had a base kibul and were separate to tuma, there would not be any issue between. I mean, there'd be no issue between Rabbi Yossi and
No.
Okay, then I'm barking up the wrong tree.
No. Our only question is, the only question we're discussing here is the kav, which is the subject of the machloket between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir. Is it pshutei kli eitz or is it not pshutei kli eitz? So when they're discussing it, hakitei utzei bekav shelo, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi Oser, I have to assume that they're talking about a kav that does not have a beit kibul. Why? Because right after the Mishnah says, the im yesh lo beit kibul, if it were to have.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that tell me about the discussion until now? Until now, we're talking about one that didn't have. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Can you say it back?
Well, since it says, since immediately after relating the machlok between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir, it says, if it had a base kibul, that subjunctive would seem to suggest that until now we've been discussing a kav that did not have a base kibul.
Excellent. So we see that just from morning pshat in the Mishnah. That's plain pshat in the Mishnah. Plain pshat in the Mishnah is the machloka between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi is talking about a kav that did not have a beit kibul for ktitin. So this is what Rava is now saying to Abaye. You, Abaye, you want to say that when Rabbi Yossi said when we stood from Rabbi Yossi from the Breita that says Shavin, right? That Asur b'Yom Kippurim, Shasur Tzedbo b'Yom Kippurim, that Rabbi Yossi was assuming the reality of a kav that had a beit kibul ktitim, and the reason it's asur is because of ta'anug. He said that's not a correct assumption that would be the kind of kav that Rabbi Yossi would have been talking about. Oh, this is what it says. Midiktani seifa, since the end of the Mishnah in Shabbat, the Mishnah that you and I just looked at, since it says in the Seifa, im yesho beit kibul ktitin tamei, michlal, that implies dereisha lav b'de'ilek ktitin askin. That implies that until now, in the beginning of the Mishnah, it was not talking about a kav with a beit kibul for ktitin. And so it pushes away your whole teirutz Abaye. Abaye, you wanted to answer this question. How could it be that Rabbi Yossi is oser for the Kiteya to use his kav on Yom Kippur, you say because it had a beit kibul ktitin umishum ta'anug, but Rabbi Yossi wasn't talking about a kav that had a beit kibul ktitin. How do I know? Because that's only introduced after the machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. It means that wasn't part of their discussion. Ela marava la'olam dekule alma min alhu. Rather, Rava says, everybody holds that it is a minal. So who's everybody, and what is the minal?
Everybody would be sort of the rabbinic.
What sort of? Everybody would be who specifically?
Oh, both. I guess both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yosef.
Both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. And what's the minal?
Minal would be shoe, footwear. So they
What is the shoe? What is the minal?
kav.
The kav. Liolam, it's always going to be the kule alma, that everybody, meaning in our context, Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yossi, min alhu. The kav is in fact a shoe. So until now, the way we've been learning, according to Rashi, who did we thought that the kav was not a shoe?
Rabbi Yossi.
Rabbi Yossi. So Rava comes and says, no, la'olam dekule alma minalhu. Now he's rejecting our premise. Our premise was that Rabbi Yossi held, why is it that we would have thought that Rabbi Yossi would have been matir, the kav on Yom Kippur, because we thought the reason he said it's asur on Shabbat is because it's not a shoe, and therefore he should have allowed it on Yom Kippur, right? That was our whole beginning. Rava rejects it. He says, no, everybody holds it's a shoe, even Rabbi Yossi. So, of course, then the question is, if he holds it's a shoe, then why does he not allow it for the Kiteya on Shabbat? Why doesn't he just agree with Rebbe Meir? Ubeshabbat bahak pligid. So on Shabbat, this is their machloket. The machloket isn't about whether the kav is a shoe or not a shoe. The machloket is mar savar. This one thinks gazrinan dilma mishtemit va'ati latuy arba amot. We make a gzeira that maybe it's going to slip off, and then he'll come to carry it 4 amot in the Reshut Rabim. So who holds that? Who's worried that that's going to happen?
I guess
You don't have to guess. Who's Oser?
who's Oser on Shabbat? Oh, that would be that'd be Rabbi Yossi.
Right. We want to understand, if Rabbi Yossi holds that the kav is in fact a shoe, so why should it be forbidden for him to wear it, for the Kiteya to wear it on Shabbat? Why doesn't he just agree with Rabbi Meir that it's a shoe? You're allowed to wear it on Shabbat. So Mar Savar Gazrini says no. Yes, it's a shoe, but because of the way it sits on the body of the Kiteya, we are worried that it's going to slip off, and then he will come to carry it in the Rishuta Rabbim. Umar Savar, and the other sir, right, the other senior, he holds Lo Gazrinin. We don't make such a gzera. So who's not goes there?
Rabbi Meir.
Rabbi Meir. So, what was the question that Rava was trying to answer, and what is his answer?
So his answer is
Oh, what was the question that he was trying to answer?
yeah.
And what's his answer?
I mean, so the question is, what is the basis the machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi?
No, no,
What's
that's not that's a question that he is going to answer. But what was the question that Gemara had to answer that Rava is now answering? I'm going. Go ahead.
Why does Rabbi Meir permit?
No, I don't want to. I don't want to fool around with this. It's okay.
Sorry.
No. You don't have to apologize. Really. Why do I keep repeating things? Because I want you to keep everything in place. And I know it is
because I'm not a base keeper. Yes.
We all have difficulty with this, right? So it takes practice and it takes shinun and it takes paying attention. So I'm going to remind us, what was the kasha? The kasha was from Rami Bar Chama. So again, we have from various Rabbanim the idea that you're allowed to wear these non-leather shoes on Yom Kippur. That's where we begin. Rami Bar Chama asks a kasha from the Mishnah in Shabbat, along with an attendant Braita, that both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi hold that the Kiteya is not allowed to wear his kav on Yom Kippur. And so it's a kasha. Why shouldn't he be allowed to wear his kav, which is just a wooden shoe of some sort? Either it's a wooden shoe or a wooden non-shoe, but it's something that's made out of wood. It's not made out of leather, and yet he's not allowed to wear it on Yom Kippur. That's a kasha on all these Rabbanim who wore their non-leather footwear on Yom Kippur. Right? That's the kasha that we have to answer. How do I reconcile what I see regarding Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir and the din of the kav on Yom Kippur? How do I reconcile that with all these Rabbanim who wore their various kinds of footwear, sha'am, etc.? How come they're allowed to wear it, but I see already from the Mishnah and this Braita, they shouldn't be allowed to wear it? Okay, that's the kasha. Abaye tries to answer the kasha by saying, the kav, this part you explained very well. The kav that Rabbi Yossi was talking about, that he was in machloket about with Rabbi Meir, wasn't just a plain kav. It was a kav that had a beit kibul and it had ktitim, and it's asur. He says it's asur on Yom Kippur because of ta'anug. Rava pushed away that answer. He had 3 kashas on that answer, and he pushes it away. And so, but now, once he pushes Abaye's answer away, we're left with the original kasha. The original kasha was this kasha of Rami Bar Chama. How can it be that all these people can wear their non-leather shoes on Yom Kippur when I see that both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi say that the Kiteya is not allowed to wear his kav on Yom Kippur? That's the kasha that Rava has to answer. So how does he answer it? So he says as follows. He says, everybody holds that the kav is a min'al. Everybody meaning certainly Rebbe Meir, because that was our assumption all along, but even Rebbe Yossi. Until now, we had thought that Rebbe Yossi held that the kav is not a shoe, but now Rava says, no, even Rebbe Yossi holds that the kav is a shoe. Now, before I go on, at that moment, if everybody holds that the kav is a shoe, then why is it asur on Yom Kippur?
Because shoes are asur on Yom Kippur.
Because shoes are asur on Yom Kippur. And that's why they're oser. So if everybody assumes that it's a shoe, why is there a machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi about Shabbat? According to Rabbi Meir, we said the reason the Kiteh can go out with his kav on Shabbat is dafka because it's a shoe and he's allowed to wear shoes on Shabbat. But now we're saying Rabbi Yossi also says that it's a shoe. So why does Rabbi Yossi say it's asur for him to wear on Shabbat? So for that, Rava says, because Rabbi Yossi says we're gozer that if we allow the Kiteya to wear the kav on Shabbat, we are afraid that when he's out in the Reshut Rabim, it's going to come off, and then he'll have to carry it, and then he'll be over on Havara B'Reshut Rabim. And Rabbi Meir says, I don't make that gzeira. So that much explains. So now, Rava so far, so what did he explain? He explained everybody holds that this is a shoe. And then that brings us back to a different question. The different question is, if everyone holds it's a shoe, why should they argue about the din on Shabbat? So he says the reason they argue about the din on Shabbat is because one says there's a gzeira that Dilma Mishtamit, and the other one says there isn't a gzeira of Dilma Mishtamit. However, what did I tell you a moment ago? Rava is left with the kasha that we had of Rami Bar Chama. So how does he answer that kasha? Since everybody's really tired, I'm going to try to wrap this part up here. We'll show you how Rashi explains this last part. But again, when we're doing this, keep this basic structure of the sugya in mind. I started off with a halacha. The halacha is that you're allowed to wear a sandal shel sha'am and all of those other things on Yom Kippur. That's the base. I asked the kasha on that because of the kav shel kiteya. And the kasha was that everybody holds that the kiteya is not allowed to wear his kav on Yom Kippur. And my assumption is that the kav of the kiteya is essentially just like the sandal shel sha'am. It's not made out of leather. Why should he not be allowed to wear it? Okay, but for whatever reason, he's not allowed to wear it. So that's a kasha on all of these people who wear sandal shel sha'am. So Abaye answers the question by saying, the kav that you're talking about is not the same as the sandal shel sha'am, because it's built in such a way that it has padding and it has ta'anug, and therefore it's asur. But if it was just a regular kav with no padding, then, in fact, you would be allowed to wear it. Rava then comes and says, no, Abaye, you're wrong. And he gives 3 reasons. I'm not going to repeat them. And he says, no, everybody holds that the kav of the kiteya is a shoe. Once he says that everybody holds, I think I'm losing both of you. Once he says that the kav of the kiteya is a shoe, he's answered the question that we had from Rabbi Bar Chama. Why is it that the kiteya is not allowed to go out with his kav on Yom Kippur?
Because it's a shoe.
Because it's a shoe. And what about the sandal shel sha'am?
It's a shoe. It's fine.
It's not a shoe.
It's not a shoe. I'm sorry. It's not a shoe.
It's not a shoe. It's not a shoe. In other words, that's the way Rava is going to answer. He's going to say, La'olam the kule alma min alhu. What does Rashi say? Min alhu. Hilkach b'yom kippurim asur. Because it's a min al, that's why both Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir hold that it's asur on Yom Kippur. But aval the hitne uduhutza, in other words, all those other ones, hitne, hutza, sha'am, etc., lav min al minhu. They're not a shoe. In other words, they're not begeder of a shoe. So the way he answers the kasha of Rami Bar Chama, how can it be that these people can go out with sandal shel hitne and hutza and sham, etc., when everybody holds that the Kitei is not allowed to go out with his kav? What's the difference between the kav and all those other things? So Rava says, because the kav, everybody holds the kav is actually a shoe, but these other things are not shoes. That's the way he answers. And adkan. This is the first way to learn the sugya. I'm not sure that I'm going to go through this today for sure. I'm not going to go through the second way. There's a whole second way of learning it, which puts the emphasis more on Rabbi Meir. Maybe I'll do it next week. Maybe I won't. But maybe we'll just go on. But before I finish today, I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, as you see, I'm not trying to make the sugya any more difficult than it is, but sometimes
one has to get the structure.
First of all, you always need the structure. You always need, when you're learning Gemara, especially in this kind of thing where there's a basic premise, and then there's a kusha, and then there's a terutz, kusha, terutz. Always be aware of what's the kasha, what's the teretz, and does the teretz answer the kasha? And in our case, what kasha am I answering? If I have, so here I have a premise, and then I had a kasha. Then I have a teretz, so that's Abaye. Abaye gives me a teretz. Rava pushes away Abaye. If I push away the teretz, if I disprove the answer, I'm left with the original kasha. Whoever says your answer is wrong, that's all well and good. Maybe it's a good point that answer is wrong. But then you're still left with the original kasha. So Rava still has to answer that original kasha. So you always need to be aware of what is it that we're trying to accomplish here. It's not enough just to flow through and say that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense unless you put it in context. So that's the first thing, and this is something. No matter what you're learning in Gemara, you always have to pay attention to this. You have to understand what was the basic premise, what's the kasha, what's the teretz. If the teretz is disproven, then you're left with the kasha. You can't just leave it hanging. If you can't answer the kasha, sometimes the Gemara can't answer a kasha, and then it'll say we don't have an answer. That's when you get teko. Teko means that there's no way. Teko may be in a slightly different context, but teko literally means it stands. In other words, I don't know how to answer this question. But here it's clear we have an answer from Rava, but we just have to understand what is his answer. What was he answering? Now, because of the way he answered, it raises some other issues. So I just want to point out something in general. This sugya here that about the kiteya, specifically about the kiteya and the kav, it appears elsewhere. So we know it appears here. We saw it appears originally in the Mishnah in Shabbat. There's another context in which it appears, which is in Masechet Yevamot. Where else in halacha is it important to know if something is a shoe or not?
But with the yibum, no, not
With
how do you call the hatara shel yibum?
Chalitza.
Chalitza, yes.
So the Torah there says that she needs to spit into his shoe. So in order for chalitza to be carried out, you need a shoe. So then it's going to be important to define what a shoe is, right? And that's the other place where this appears. It appears in that context. So if we were to do this in greater depth, I would show you the sugya there also in Yevamot, and I would get into some of these other details. But I'm not. And what I'm going to do just to finish off today, and I think next time, I'm not sure if I'm going to do the whole other way of learning it with Rabbi Meir, but let's just take a moment and look at the way the Rambam paskins this sugya.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
If the concept is that you may have a machloket, it's not forbidden to have a machloket. Why do you do such an acrobacy? I don't know how you say in English.
What do you mean?
Lulianut or something to prove that there is no machloket. Yes, either you think it's okay. There are machlokot. I accept the fact that there are machlokot, and besides the machlokot, there will also be a psika, that this way or the other way. But it seems that here you are doing like an acrobat. You are doing a huge effort to show that there is no machloket.
Okay, actually, first I'll say two things. First of all, here we acknowledge that there is a machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi regarding the din on Shabbat. Nobody says that they're not arguing. In other words, your first statement is true. There's a basic idea that we, at this point in time, by the time we get to the Mishnaic era, we accept the fact that there's machloket. But what the Gemara is doing here is not to prove that there isn't a machloket. Gemara here is just trying to understand how to reconcile what the Maaseh Rav of all these Rabbanim, all these Amoraim were on Yom Kippur. How do I reconcile that with what wasn't a machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi? Because Dafka on Yom Kippur, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi agreed that the Kitea is not allowed to go out with his kav. So that was my question. It wasn't to say there's no machloket, it's to say, how could they have been matir sandal shel sham in the face of the fact that these Tanaim were both oser the kav shel kitea, which should be basically the same thing as the sandal shel sham. And so according to Rava, the answer is no, there is a difference. That the kav shel kitea, that has the status of a shoe. But these other things don't have a status as a shoe. So now...
So a logical contradiction is not a machloket. It's something wrong with there's something wrong with the
understanding. Okay, so now that we've made this summary, so now you and I, we're going to be left with this question. So according to the way we've learned the sugya, what is the maskana lahalacha? We would say sandal shel sham is mutar on Yom Kippur, but we would also have to say that the kav shel kitea is asur on Yom Kippur. The reason that the kav shel kitea is asur Yom Kippur is because, according to the way Rashi learned, because it's a shoe, and shoes are not allowed on Yom Kippur, and the sandal shel sham is not a shoe for this purpose. So now we have a question. Why is it? Why should it be that the kav shel kitea should be considered a shoe? It's made out of wood. Why? How is it fundamentally different than the sandal shel sha'am, or dehutzi, or derihite, right? All of those other words. So this goes back to what I started off with at the beginning of the shiur. What is fundamentally different about the kav that makes it distinct from a sandal shel sha'am, etc.?
That it is hard.
That it's hard.
Mhm.
So maybe that's the real distinction. In other words, we thought at the beginning of the sugya, what makes something not a shoe? If it's made out of something that isn't leather.
Yeah.
Right? If it's if it's made from some kind of vegetable source. But maybe that's not true. And maybe now, according to the maskana is you are allowed to wear these things that are made from non-leather, as long as they are soft, as long as that when you're wearing them, they protect your feet, but they don't give you, let's say, they don't necessarily give you the same level of protection or the same kind of comfort as wearing something that might be hard.
Nowadays, are you allowed to wear wooden footwear on?
Okay, so
on Yom Kippur? If you come from Holland, yes, they have this
right,
wooden shoes, yes.
right.
If you are living in Holland.
All right, so this is what we're going to do. Next week, we're going to look a little bit more into the halachot, but I'll just show you just a second. This is the way the Rambam paskins. So this is Hilchot Shvitat Asur, Perek Shlishi, Halacha Zayin. Asur lin'ol min al v'sandal, afilu b'raglo achat. Right? You're not allowed to put on a shoe or a sandal, even on one foot. Umutar letzet b'sandal shel sham, v'shel gomeh, v'chiyotzei bahen. Right? So you are allowed to wear a sandal that's made of these other materials. The korech adam beged al raglav yotzei bo. You're also allowed to just put a cloth around your foot and go out with that. The korech adam beged yotzei bo. Sharei, and he says, the Rambam says why? Shaharei koshi haaretz magia leraglo. The hardness of the ground gets to his foot. In other words, if you're wearing sandal shel sham, shel gomeh, or just putting a cloth around your foot, you could still feel the hardness of the ground. Umargish shuhu yachef, and you feel that you're barefoot. In other words, that you're not wearing a shoe. So, okay, and then the next part is about tinokot, which is the hemshech of the sugya. So I'm not going to read that. So this is the way the Rambam paskins. So the Rambam holds you are allowed to wear sandal shel sham. He implies, without saying specifically, he implies that you would not be allowed to wear a wooden shoe, right? Because he's saying you can wear all these things because when you're wearing them, you can feel the hardness of the ground. If you're wearing a wooden shoe, then you don't feel the hardness of the ground. So that's consistent with the way we learned the sugya. That's consistent with the way we saw the maskana according to Rava. Next week.
So you maintain some kind of inui with this kind of footwear.
Yes, you have some kind of an inui, or at least it's a atanimna me hata'anug, right? But I think the way you put it is correct. You know, it's because you're wearing. What's the point of wearing something that's not a shoe? The point of wearing the shoe is that it's not just protects you, but it gives you, you don't suffer when you're walking. But there's a kind, you don't necessarily suffer when you're wearing these other kinds of things, but you're not as protected. There's an idea that you have to feel the hardness of what you're walking on. That seems to be the way. So this is consistent the way we learn the sugya, which, as I say, that's the way Rashi learned the sugya. There's another way of learning the sugya, which we didn't get into. Okay. I'm going to leave it now with the Rambam. I think what we should do next week, I'm not sure that I'm going to go through the whole sugya again in the other way, but what we will do is we'll look at the Tur and at the Shulchan Aruch, and I'll show you the Aruch HaShulchan, who summarizes some of the other shitot. And we'll leave it at that for today. So thank you all for coming. If I'm hard on you, it's because I know you can do it. And it's not just a matter of being tired and dropping off to sleep. As you see, that's an issue that we all have to deal with. But the main thing I'm trying to get
you are in the middle of the day.
What's that?
You are in the middle of the day.
I'm in the middle of the day, but no, I'll tell you something, and I've told you this many times. Even if it would be the same time for me at night, because I get to give shir and I get to do the talking, it keeps me awake.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I admit that. I freely admit that. But all I'm saying is, first of all, if you have time, go over the sugya again, and when you're learning, whether it's with me or with anyone else, these are the things you need to pay attention to. When the Gemara gives a question, what's the question? When the Gemara gives the answer, what's the answer? Did it answer the original question? And so forth. You always have to be critical in your learning. You think that this is an answer, but when you think about it, did it really answer the question? And as you see at the very end of our sugya, Rava does answer our original question, but because of the way he answers that question, he had to answer a second question. So you need to understand what is he answering with what. Okay. Everybody go to bed.
Night. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Cool too. Bye-bye.